You're listening to Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Matt Holmen, designer and musician. Hope you enjoy this one.
We're good. That's great. That's great news.
So yeah, thank you for your patience.
No worries.
So you're just free all day, huh? What's going on?
Well, I'm freelancing right now. I was working in a kitchen, but I'm not doing that anymore.
In a kitchen?
So yeah, I was cooking. It's crazy. I've always been like, I don't know. I have had like 5 different careers because I did music for so long and then just kind of ended up in my 30s kind of like searching for something else. And it's really interesting. I found like a ton of value in just doing different kinds of work and different jobs. But that's also means that like I've kind of been constantly searching for things and changing. And I just moved up to LA 2 years ago with my fiance. She's a pastry chef, so that's kind of how I got into the food world.
Are you looking for other jobs because music in and of itself is not fulfilling, or just because it's not financially sustainable? Yeah,
I think music in and of itself is not necessarily a career for me or for many people.
Do you mean career from a financial perspective?
Well, yeah.
No, I only ask because I'm pretty fascinated by the idea that like the financial stuff's pretty humdrum and ordinary, it's tough. But I do find that sometimes you can really love something like, it's definitely true in my instance. But you come to a place where you go, I don't know, maybe not that I need a break from it, or it's just like not. There's a lot of ways to express one's interest in music and art, and it's not always as holistically fulfilling as one assumes in the beginning. So for me, like illustration or comic making didn't amount to be big enough for life in the long run. I still do it here and there and on the side. But I find that the generative impulse manifested in a lot of different jobs down the road that are all connected. So I'm just curious to know if that bouncing around is one of like financial need, or also just you like to explore these different avenues.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we probably think pretty similarly about this. I love comics, but I've never been one to create them. Like, it's great to be a fan of comics. There's so much good stuff out there and it's so fascinating. And I kind of feel like I've gotten to that place with music where I'm like, I'm a better music listener now than I was when I was making music, and like touring and, like that was my entire identity. I feel like I'm more balanced and engaged in different kinds of music and just in the idea of music in general, rather than the idea of fame and success or whatever, which is kind of like, I had a friend who was a lawyer, and she was just like, when you listen to your inner child, like telling you to follow your dreams, you're listening to a middle schooler. And I'm like, that's funny. It's true.
Well, it's true. It's right there, right? Your inner child. It's literally right there.
Exactly.
Yeah, there is a weird, unsophisticated sentiment to following your dreams. It's much, much, much more complicated. I think often on the podcast, I'm trying to show hopefully younger artists or people just starting that there's no simple platitude like that that's going to get you through it. Mm. You know what I mean?
Totally.
But I cut you off there, so keep going on it.
No. I mean, it's funny whenever people ask me, like, how do I learn guitar? How do I learn to be like a great guitarist? And my standard advice is always just like, whatever, like, I know that you think you need to like learn all these scales and you need to be, you know, practicing in a certain organized way. I think that the real advice is like, do whatever it is that will make you not quit, because it's the only thing that is indicative of success down the road, is just like, stick to itiveness. You know, like that's really the only thing that predicts success. Where, you know, a lot of times, especially in music and other like passion industries and fields, is like, you know, you call ahead for directions, you ask the people who are successful, and they just are oftentimes the luckiest people. And so a lot of times their advice is the least instructive, for most people. And I also think if you were to ask, like, you know, I feel like part of being an artist, or part of being a craftsperson of anything is doing it, you know, for the glory of the chore, as they say. You know, just there's something about chopping an onion. There's just something about just doing a nice fine dice that I take a great pride in. And I find that I have a lot more like, and maybe it's just because of like where cooking came into my life later, I just have a lot more pride and respect for the craft and the tradition of knife skills than I ever did of learning or reciting scales, or things that some of my other more successful musician friends were like more intuitively in touch with and respectful of. I just was always kind of like, fuck that. I just want to make something goofy with my friends. And like music was kind of the avenue to do that. It would bring a bunch of stuff together, a bunch of people together. So yeah, I think there are a lot of ways that it can manifest itself as well, when you said career, I mean, you know, the word career to me indicates financial, right? I mean, otherwise it's a vocation or a hobby or something, or a passion or whatever, but it's not. I think Career is, that's the money part.
Well, I think all those things get mixed together in these pursuits on like some, you know, like more normal life paths. I think there's much more clarity in those, you know, like I do this, this is my job, and this thing right here is my hobby, etc. And I'm not denigrating that at all. I think there's strength in that too, knowing where these things fit in. And I do find it odd when people, you know, kind of talk about the following of one's dreams or their inner child, because I think it all is kind of, you know, it's very modern in the sense that like people think you make these decisions, and I don't. As much as I love free will and decision making, I just don't think you don't just choose. Or if you do choose, it will last very shortly. Like, oh, I'm going to go to art school and make art. That's not going to last very long, in my opinion. If you're called to do things, you almost have no choice. You're almost, you know, compelled to do so. So I assume, it seems like music can also often get mixed into the social development of a teenager, whereas art is like the opposite. You know, it probably stunted my social abilities for a decade, you know, because it drives you inward. But I could see where, you know, I've talked to a couple musicians who kind of shed music for whatever reason once they entered their 30s, and it just seems like a young man's game in some sense, that, you know, there's like the partying element, the touring, the physicality. What was your experience? I understand that, you know, I'm kind of collecting the Horcruxes of Fox, the band, or the shards of it. But you were in that band, right? Fox?
That's right.
And you went to the highest highs in fame.
I guess.
No, how famous did it get? How famous did you? How high did it get?
I mean, we were on a small indie label, and, you know, like we released our album. We were on the same indie label as Sylvan Esso, and we released our album the same summer that they released their album. So, and actually the same day that Ed Sheeran released the Green album of his was. And but so all to say, you know, poor timing aside, perhaps. We toured the world. Like we were a band for almost 4 years. We played a lot of shows. We played at like some of the biggest, coolest venues around the world. Like it was definitely the peak of my musical career, my success as an artist.
Nice.
But, you know, we like, we came up in a small college town in Madison, Wisconsin, and that was partially strategic. Partially we just lived there. Partially it was like, we had all these friends moving to LA and Nashville and kind of grinding it out against like every other form of entertainment and every like top tier artist. And it was like in Madison or any small town, you can kind of be more a part of the community and a part of the city. Like when we released our album, the mayor declared it Fox Day.
Wow.
We have like a declaration.
Does it remain to be Fox Day?
I don't know if they still observe it. But yeah, I mean, that was 10 years ago. So, yeah. Anyway, I just felt like you could be kind of a part of a community in a world, a big fish in a small pond, I guess is how you'd say it. But yeah, that was definitely like my life and my world and my identity for a long time. And also like the top of my success as an artist for sure. But like you said, I think that.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, the young man's game aspect of it is interesting because I'm a sports fan, and we're getting to that age. You're watching these athletes. You're just watching boys running around hitting each other, and I'm like, wow, I'm like literally older than everyone except Aaron Rodgers. Like, what happened? But it's kind of great. Yeah. It's just acknowledging it. Like, music is not a young man's game, but pop music and success is, and we were all playing pop music, whatever we called it. Everyone was striving for the same pool of listeners, basically, like more or less, 15 to 30, whatever, that demographic, it's not like at that time people were just, content to play like a bar gig, once a month and just go like, I'm a musician. Like that wouldn't really qualify as like an identity for most people in their 20s, but it can be a huge part of your life going forward and in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever later, that just playing music, sitting in with a friend's band, recording some stuff here and there, doing a show, doing an open mic or whatever can be just as much of a part of your, like, your hobby. I mean, football's a part of my identity and I just like scream at a TV, what I mean? Like it's about as uninvolved as you can get, from an actual activity. So
yeah. No, I relate. I mean, I love football. I'm happy that the Bears are, 1-0 and the Packers are not.
No, thanks to your quarterback, but hey,
no,
you guys.
No, not at all. I mean, actually, I thought about the other day what is that guy like? Is he like 20 years old? The idea,
21, 22.
Just the idea of being mature, like the expectations are very funny. Just in the same sense that there's 35, like I'm 35, and if the guy's 35 in the NFL, he's like washed. It's really crazy. Athletics are so beautiful and such a different maturity timeline. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're super immature athletes. But I often think about those analogously. I think there's such a weird connection in my head. But fortunately, this game of art and music can go till you're like 90. It never stops. I think that's what's so cool about athletics and the Olympics, et cetera. And so you're also like, if I understand correctly, you do visual art as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a graphic designer for some time, but I wouldn't call that art. But that's kind of its own conversation.
Yeah, I see. Because I mean, it seems that your primary digital identity is that you are a designer in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
As I see on your website.
There you go.
It's a very mature, I find that being a designer, and I would probably put myself in a similar bucket, is a very mature, excessively mature thing to be.
It's funny because design is also kind of a passion industry, and it's so flooded with people who, want to be, making logos and whatever, and kind of don't necessarily have like typography figured out or like how to use InDesign. And the way that I always looked at it and the way I pitch myself is that like the difference between art and design is that design solves a problem, and art's not supposed to solve problems, not at least directly, it's
just
meant
makes problems.
It makes problems. It's open-ended, and it's kind of like, here, you put this together. And like that's what we love about art. Right. But I think a lot of times designers and people who do work in, the creative fields get misguided thinking I'm an artist, I'm here to express myself. No, you're here to listen and understand someone else's problem and help them solve it. And like, that is really gratifying and maybe the mature part of design, but that's not all design. I mean, or that's not all designers, at least. And, I'm not immune to that either. Like, I want to make cool stuff. Like, I moved to California because I was like, I just kind of felt like I was working at an agency in Madison, and it was great. And I genuinely loved all my coworkers, and the work we did was pretty cool. But I was just like, I want to meet people like younger than me working on stuff that's like working on art and just, pushing themselves. And the timing was just kind of funny because it was like right when sort of everything started tightening up and, interest rates go up and everyone's starting to go like, is the economy not as good as we thought? And talking to a lot of people in like Silicon Valley and like tech jobs and stuff who are, getting laid off and saying, I don't know, and so it's definitely put me in a reflective place where, career is just it's so many little compounded choices and lily pads that you don't know where they're going to lead. But I guess that's the joy of it to some extent, is like, and something that I always apply my like design thinking, mindset to is like, what, like, you can't necessarily predetermine the outcome, but if you have a process that helps you evaluate things and, learn lessons and be self-critical, and welcome. And honestly, I think that's probably the biggest part, is being self-critical and welcoming critique, from other people, and not being, too tied up in it and too tied up in your success and failure as a designer or as in anything. Just, being willing to be vulnerable, as much as that is therapy talk, it's also like professional in a big way as well, at least in design.
Yeah, design is interesting to me because I've always liked designers who are more artists, like kind of caught in the middle. And personally, I still get kind of hung up in the middle there. But I think that tension's good for me, at least. I don't think when I went to school, all the graphic designers I knew were super lame. They just like didn't really care. They didn't care about art in any sense, but I also thought they didn't really care about design, in my opinion, either. They were just kind of like, I don't know. I guess they're more like technicians often, almost like musicians can be, So that connection makes more sense to me, like kind of plugging in. But there is that conundrum, though. Like, if you don't have a distinct flavor or style as an individual autonomously, then usually your design isn't gonna work. I think of it as a relationship. Like, I often cringe if I feel that two people dating have become one. And although I'm married and the marriage concept is that of one flesh, like, I think what's supposed to happen is you're like two, individuated people who choose to be one. And I feel the same way. Like, that process of being a good illustrator or designer was really hard for me early on because I took the art director too seriously early on. And I could see my early illustrations were just like nervous in a sense and not confident. So I think that was always like, that's the challenge of society that I see in design for me, is like, metaphorically, it's not a coincidence to me that as I matured as a person, I gravitated more and more to the problem solving nature of design. Because, and I think I'll just go in waves my whole life, but I look at the potentially avoidant nature of art making from a certain perspective now, and I'm just like, maybe I'm becoming too serious, but the frivolity doesn't interest me in the same sense anymore.
Doodling doesn't have the same appeal as it once did.
No, I don't think quite. It fits into a larger recipe, but it isn't like, I don't valorize or romanticize a life of circuity anymore. Like, just, kind of wandering about. I don't think that's, I don't love it. I don't think that's, maybe when I was younger, I romanticized it, but I'm more. It has a place. Yeah. It's part of a larger puzzle, but I think more and more I'm just interested in like design made me more interested in systems, I think, like templates and having a family also made me more interested in just like, no, there's like shit to get done. Like I can't play a video game without a sense of like, I'm going to die and this is a waste of my time anymore. But I can watch football. I can watch the
Funny how that works.
Play football. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, there still is a sense of community and unknowing in sports, which it's like the only thing that is on TV that you don't like. The outcome is not predetermined. At least that's what we believe. And you're joined, and like, you know, you're joined. Like I'm texting my friends during every single football game, just like, we just text like, oh shit, you know, like because we're watching the same thing. There is like a social element to it as opposed to just, you know, playing Overwatch until 4 a.m. It's just, I can't do that anymore either. Whereas like I play Magic the Gathering has been a game that I've played for a really long time, and that really brings together a lot of my favorite elements of art and design, you know, design in many different senses. And you know, what people say is it's not the Magic, it's the gathering, you know, it's getting together with people. And especially now in I have a huge group of Magic friends in LA. I've met so many people through Magic and so many different kinds of people. And we get together like once a week, you know, and at least, I mean, there are events going all the time, and it really is just like cool to see all these different people getting together and doing something like that's not, I mean, yes, it's frivolous, but it's also like, these are some of the, like I'm making new friends. I'm 37 and I've made like 20 friends since moving out to LA who play Magic. And it's like, that is pretty rare. You know, and I've always been a big fan of like hobbies I've been a fan of the way that hobbies allow you to make friends. And especially later in life, it's just you're not stuck in the same circumstances, just wandering around with people. You know, you're like, hey, I want to be here and we have something in common and like, let's share that. And
absolutely.
That's always, it's just always been huge to me, you know, I don't know.
No, I completely understand. I think what's interesting from a design perspective is I don't think I realized early on how important, you know, we're talking about how in some sense you're solving other people's problems, you know, and then so the main thing becomes, what's up, Kat? Becomes you better pick those people very clearly and wisely, because like the curation of your clients is super hard early on, I find, but it pretty much sends you on your way, because it's not your own creative impulse that's carving out the path. It's actually, you know, this client work. So that's something I also found quite difficult, is just like, especially when you need money, you're kind of taking whatever the fuck comes your way. And then you kind of end up in some place where you didn't intend to. At least that was my experience early on.
Yeah. My first client was my dad. He was like home making some wine, and he had me make these like little stick-on labels. I was like 4. And I still have them. It's really funny. It's just like a pile of clip art in like 10 different fonts, you know, and
nice. So there was the seeds early on for this trajectory.
Yeah. Design was my first interest as like writing and design were my 2 first interests. I remember the first day that I stayed home sick from school in kindergarten, and I played Storybook Weaver. And I played it all day, and it was a game where you would like create storybook pages, and you write it. You know, you write in the story, and you'd put in the clip art, and you'd add the sound effects, the babbling brook, and turn the page, and you know,
it's a beautiful game.
It really is. I mean, I think that kind of thing has come back a little bit more. These more like sandbox type of games and things that you can be narrative. And I mean, even Minecraft, I think that's a big part of its success. But yeah, after that design, like learning like Photoshop type programs early in my life was like, that was the first creative thing that I was interested in. I got pulled into music by my friend Zach, our mutual friend Zach, who just needed a bassist. He's like, hey, I need a bassist. I'm like, okay. So I learned bass when I was 12, and that determined the next 20 years of my life, you know, just that choice. Because of, like you said, you know, part of it is just the social aspect of getting together with people. You become each other's identity, you know, you become each other's social group. And yeah, there's the valor and the fun, you know, like the excitement and the adventure and stuff like that. But but also just like on a practical level, it's like, these are the people that you hang out with. So that ends up being the work. Like how you were saying about the client work you get kind of determines your career. It's kind of similar for me with music, you know, just the people, you know, are musicians. So you end up, you know, playing more music and whatever kind of music that is, you know, I have a pretty broad taste, you know, sense of taste, that I also have just always been, you know, in that designer mindset where I'm like, I'm helping you execute your vision, and my pride will get in the way and tell me, you know, when I can't stomach it and I need to be right about something, I need to be heard. But yeah, I've always sort of had that, like, that mentality of, you know, creativity is collaboration to me, or that those things are very, very deeply connected. And, yeah, I think that goes back to my time in music and stretches into design and even cooking, you know, is something that's really, you need to, you know, just check with other people. Does this need salt? Like, I've been tasting it for, you know, half an hour. I've been in the house. It smells like pork. I can't smell it anymore. And they come in like, ooh, wow, is that, you know, it smells so good.
Sounds nice. Yeah. Sounds nice.
It's just something that, it's something that you lose a little touch with. So, you know, the more you're, you know, watching your leg hair grow, it's like, can't see it. So yeah, I've always thought, you know, collaboration and being in communication with other people is like the root of creativity and creation, you know, for me. For me personally. Yeah. It's different for everybody.
No, I know. Because, it's tricky for me. I feel like I have 4 older brothers, so maybe there was some part of me that, you know, when I was younger, maybe that's a way to kind of like differentiate yourself making art. But
yeah,
I was like, really wasn't collaborating much, but once, because in school, really, as like an artist, you're not collaborating, you know, you're getting graded on your own work. And then when I started working really with Neve and Jesse, who I assume you know, that really led to not only maturity outside of art over time, but also pretty much what led to design, I think. Like, it kind of broke something open. And then, like you said, design is a much bigger thing. Mm-hmm. And now I work in modes that are much, much larger than, you know, working with a art director. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's been a strange journey. And for me, like, I can't even imagine how it could ever be inverted. They feel like they stack on top of each other vertically. They're not, one could not have happened before or after, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just feels like threaded in a way that feels hopefully like a progression. I mean, it certainly feels like one. I think it is. And I could see how cooking could also weave into that. You know, they're very systematized processes that are very, very precise. And I assume not terribly about your own expression. I mean, there might be some percentage of you in it, right? But are you working in like a high-end, what would you say, kitchen?
No, I was working kind of more like at a deli, but I had like kind of carte blanche to kind of make whatever I wanted. And there's a certain aspect, I guess you're right, it is pretty systematized, and there are certain things that you need to be able to do right. And this is something I always had a hard time with music. Like I was saying, I just didn't really want to study it. I wanted to do it, and that was it. And, you know, other people were more interested in kind of learning the why. And as I started to learn a little bit about music theory, I realized that I had, you know, in some ways, once you start learning, you know, they'll say you know enough to be dangerous, which is basically like you don't know anything, but you think you do. Yeah. And I definitely got stuck on that in music a little bit. And I wasn't super just interested in building on that. Like you were saying, just kind of threading together the steps of your career or of your progression as a creator or whatever. For me with cooking, it was much more about learning like the really core basic, like knife skills and just like the temperatures that you're supposed to cook meat to, and, you know, how when the solids separate from butter, if you're making a brown butter vinaigrette, like how do we emulsify, you know, like there are just certain techniques that just are needed in order to make something passable. Whereas with art, you know, and visual art and music, there are plenty of people completely untrained who just are geniuses and they just do it their own way. No one can replicate it. It is what it is. So there is an element of that in cooking for me. The thing about it, the creativity that really interests me in it is working with a limited palette, because there's something every creative person knows is like terrifying about the blank page. Mm-hmm. And with cooking, it's like you walk into the pantry, you walk into the cooler, what's there? Like that, there is no blank page. It's like, this is what That's you true. Have, so to me, my favorite designer, who is the head designer of Magic the Gathering, Mark Rosewater, not a graphic designer, a game designer. He has a platitude. He always just says, restrictions breed creativity. And I love that. And I think that was something that I discovered much more and came to learn like a lot more deeply through cooking, because you've got like I said, you've got your pantry and you've got your fridge, and like, that's what you're cooking with. And if you can't go to the store, like you got to make something right now. Like there's something exciting when people are like, hey, we're 30 minutes away. We're coming over for dinner. And you're like, shit, I still haven't made like a side. What can I do with, this can of creamed corn or whatever? Which I kind of forgot the question. You were just basically asking about my history with cooking and stuff. And honestly, I'm mostly a home cook. Like that's the thing. I kind of just had this weird random opportunity to try it out. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's for me in the long run, but it was definitely, it was fun to explore. And I guess one of the takeaways I had from it, it's like, whenever I went to a community college in Wisconsin, and they always have like graduates come back for, like career day stuff or just like to count, to talk with students. Right. Mm-hmm. And there's always a student who goes like, okay, so I know you got your full-time job and everything. And like, that's great. I know you're loving your agency life, but like, how do you find time for like your passion projects, And like everyone on the panel is just like, I hate to tell you, but I mean, I don't come home and like want to do more graphic design after work like that. I don't do that. Like maybe for a little while I try to do it about whatever. I'm more interested in doing something different now. Like, and I think certainly some people can just do the same thing, day in and day out and day, and night, by night too. But for a lot of people, it's kind of like whatever you are doing at work, you're probably not super stoked to do at home. And when I think about all like the different skills that everybody has and can like try to monetize, like some aren't really worth sacrificing, what you give up in interest, at home. Music kind of became one of those things to me where I was like, I hate being cynical about music and about like young performers and just feeling like it's kind of just feeling cynical about it. And kind of similarly, with cooking, I'm like, I just cook for 10 hours. I'm coming home. I'm like, am I really going to like, bust out like another meal? It's going to take me like 2 hours to make it. It's just the interest doesn't stay there, or the motivation or whatever. And so that was one of the things I found about design is that you go home and you're not really forced to design anything in a particular, like in a normal circumstance. Your wife probably isn't asking you if to design design a spread for her, as opposed to, making dinner, which is like such a way of showing someone you care. And, and similarly with like, if you're someone who can communicate really well and can, like, if you're a counselor or something like that, I mean, maybe some people, it's just, they never turn it off and they come home, with just as much energy for their family as they have for their clients at work. I just was kind of realized I'm not one of those people, and that I have a lot of interests and I find work to be interesting and fulfilling almost no matter what it is. Even if I am frustrated, with the owner or the boss or the clients or whatever, work is intrinsically like interesting to me because like the main thing I'm interested in is collaborating and like understanding other people, like honestly, like I'm not so focused on style and expression and things like that. And like, or a certain level of success, although it's necessary to a certain degree, it's mostly about like, the people like that's what keeps you at a job, I think, or keeps me at least like keeps me going, keeps me interested and fulfilled. Do you have, do you have a similar? How do you look at it?
It's quite similar, but it's like more torn, I guess, in a way. Yeah, I think in some sense it's what I was saying earlier. Like I suppose the collective and the individual are always in tension, you know, like, and people kind of lean one way or the other ideologically often. I definitely am fascinated by individuals. It's probably why I like interviewing people.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely fascinated by singular voices as well. But I can also recognize the limitations of what that does in your life often. So there's like this weird, I don't know if it's just like you have to choose one or the other. I've talked to certain artists about how certain heroic pursuits in art might run contrary to health, both physical and mental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think I'm always trying to sort that out. I also just had a kid, so like the more your heart opens, thank you. The more your heart opens, you know, for me, art came from a very weird and intellectual place, and definitely doesn't come from the heart very much. And I also behaved from those same places, and as my heart expands, it's harder for me to understand where these things fit in. I mean, design fits in quite nicely, or fabrication, as you mentioned, because it's much easier to express love to, you know, my suburban family, or I live in the suburbs, or my suburban client, than my obscure comics would have elicited, you know. And I don't think I lament the shift in any way, but I'm also not terribly convenient about it. I think something is lost in that process. That choice to become more human than alien, you know, there are trade-offs, but when others need you to be human for them, you kind of have to, I think you have to show up. And maybe when I'm 60, I'll become more of an alien again and just kind of go out into the far reaches of abstraction.
A lot of men do.
Yes, they must.
For sure.
But in the meantime, I really kind of believe in like in evolving. What would you say? Like, I think in modernity, we fool ourselves into thinking like I can remain one particular stage of life in perpetuity if I desire to be. And even if it's like, I used this example before in this podcast, but like, I don't think Madonna should try to stay fuckable when she's like, I don't know, she looks like a bunch of like strangely shaped raw meat. I don't know her face.
Yeah.
And like, it's just like, it's okay to not be like, I will enjoy the day where I'm completely unfuckable and where like, where I don't even think about that, or, you know, I look forward to being old in a lot of ways, but I really want to see that evolution in my life, and I can't help but feel like it'll be reflected in my work or my career. It's unavoidable for me. I can't freeze a frame and say, all right, this thing worked when I was 20, so I'm going to just like quadruple down on that and kind of like quarter it off, and then have life be on that outside of it so that it can retain its, like, there are people who can do it. It's incredibly impressive to me. Like, they can just be a comic artist for 80 years. And I'm not saying that they don't mature. I just think they have a different psychology. I would question if they do, if I'm being frank, because I think that each medium lends itself to certain things. You know, like if you're a dancer, it's a completely different life than being a comic book artist. And they have their pros and cons if you're a musician, etc. What I just came to find was that design offers you to be versatile in a pretty uncertain economy, but it also really, when you're interested in language, sounds like we're both interested in English. Like I was considering being an English major. That means in some sense, I think you're interested in communication, and art is so strange because it's like oftentimes I felt like I was communicating to myself in a kind of circular fashion when I made books, and they're very weird. Like I don't even know what they were getting at, to be honest. So I don't know. I think there's something naturally unhealthy about that. I just think, and perhaps I wasn't willing to sacrifice that. I think I want to be human at the end of the day. It sounds like an admission of failure, but I would have hated to say it in my 20s, but I'd rather be a really good human than a really good artist.
Totally. And I think that we're honestly tricked into feeling the opposite in our 20s by, like, I started to wonder, where did my dream of becoming a famous musician come from? What was the image I was holding in my mind, right? Like, what was the picture that talk about an artist who can keep making comics for 80 years. Well, I don't know how old she is, but Linda Berry was one of my favorite artists, and she taught at UW. So, like, we were in Madison at the same time, like when she won her MacArthur grant and everything. And, she was teaching a class on imagery. And it was a multidisciplinary class, working with artists and also working with just like general, it's a gen ed. I don't know if it was a gen ed, but working with other students of different disciplines. And just kind of talking about, how do images work? What is an image? How is it different than a picture? Like, what happens in your brain when, you see a collection of lines? She does this illustration exercise that I think it's an Ivan Brunetti thing, where you draw like a car in 1 minute, and then you do it in 30 seconds, 15, 10, 5, and you look at each drawing, and for everyone it's different, but there's kind of a sweet spot where, your brain and your pen are moving at the same speed. And the 1 minute, like, if you have people I like to do this, like, at just like having a dinner party or something, pass around a notebook and just have people do self-portraits in this way. And they're like 1 or 2 minutes. Their longest drawing is almost always their worst, because of just the overcomplication that obviously it's easy to put too many lines on a page, put too much information down. But there's kind of a sweet spot where there's something is expressed that's genuine and also is communicative. And a lot of times I think as creatives, we have all the time in the world, sort of designed a life for ourselves where we can be kind of bohemian, so to speak, and just kind of live like at, our own, and serve at our own pleasure. And there is something that's not deeply good, capital G good, about that, because it is self-serving. And, at the end of the day, a lot of great art comes from that place, and that art connects with other people. And so it's probably overall worth it as a society. But if you're someone who is feeling like your life is suffering because you need to live this image in your mind from, like, listening to that inner child who's saying, like, you got to play Glastonbury, man. Like, that's the only way you'll be successful. It's like, that's a harmful, like, it's an aspirational image that is, I feel like, impressed upon us just like by culture, and just kind of like, try to do this so that more people will do it for free, which is its own kind of government subsidy. It's a cultural subsidy that people really will, like, kind of sacrifice everything for. And like you said, at a certain point, you're like, you know what, I can't actually sacrifice my family for my self-expression. I can find a way for those things to live together that is a compromise of some kind. But again, that's, I don't even
think it's a compromise at this point. I think, and I really do value, and I don't romanticize it, but I really do value those who are just willing to throw it all away for the best art they can make.
Sure.
I think it's amazing, because I recognize the value of that sacrifice for me as the listener. But I do wonder if perhaps it misses something. Perhaps it doesn't carry the most holistic. Maybe it doesn't have the potential to be as great as I think. I think about how the majority of art, visual art, and music as well, I mean, largely devotional stuff. It was obviously at that time, religion and God was the peak of everything. And so art pointed at that. And I just think we live in probably the most narcissistic era ever. And so art points at that, which is the self.
So far.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's been true since for about 100. It's a pattern of the last 100 years, and it's no coincidence that the artists and culture became the replacement of God. I just think it's a mistake. Sure. I just think it's a mistake, fundamentally.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And I don't like. I think I pretty much feel that if someone, like, if anyone's honest with me about what they worship, you can basically tell where their life's going to go. And I just think you can do the same with the civilization. And as much as I love the flurry of beauty and multiplicity of the last 100 years, and probably the majority of my influences are from that period, I can also recognize that perhaps it's just the beautiful, flames of it all going away and burning down. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I think the way I understand that is like, it's always changing, right? And like that's essentially what burning is matter changing states, or whatever, ideas, society changing states. And I mean, yeah, of course, most of our influences come from the past 100 years. There were just like exponentially more ideas over the past 100 years. Like the number of bands that existed in 1960. True. You had to be an expert to get into a recording studio, and now you don't even have to play an instrument. And there's something about that that's like the competition kind of drives people to need to be like the brightest, like boldest version of themselves. And that's cool because it does, create some great artists. But like anyone who's like at the top of their field, or like, they have certainly had to sacrifice something or other, or there's a part of their personality that they intentionally said, you know what, this is not going to be my focus. That's okay. I'll choose not to have a family, or I'll choose not to, exercise, or whatever it might be. There's just plenty of ways to sacrifice. I guess when I say compromise, I'm saying like compromise in the sense of like you de-emphasize one thing and emphasize another one, and whether that's between you and God, or you and yourself, as it were, or between you and your wife or your collaborators or whatever. I think that's kind of inevitable because I just think that ultimately it's kind of a trap, to think that pursuing self-glorification, through art is worthwhile, because it's pretty hollow and very uncommon to be successful. So you do have to have this. Think about this. When you look at someone like Caleb Williams, the young quarterback for the Chicago Bears, he just wanted to be Aaron Rodgers, right? And he thought he could be. He watched Aaron Rodgers and he's like, I can do that. And you know what? Maybe he can. But like that's a prerequisite to being an NFL quarterback. You have to be the cockiest motherfucker in the world. You have to be. If you're not, you're going to be eaten alive, right? And it's kind of true in like art too. You just kind of whatever. It's not cockiness, but it's some kind of self-assuredness, that is just a prerequisite, or some kind of boldness, or whatever exactly it is. There's something that.
Would you say that you had that or more early on?
I think so. I mean, definitely like at least tried to emulate it more seriously at the time.
Yeah, and that's where it's like it's complex, right? Like, I don't think we're talking about confidence, but yeah, I certainly had this. I won't call it a delusion. Maybe it's just an illusion of, because it produces something potentially real. I don't want to call it that, Sure, it's more powerful than that. And I definitely had the illusion that the work I was making had to be made. And it's fascinating. It's like, if you don't plan ahead for the kind of turns in the road, like saying like, okay, that could be true in your 20s, but you might want to back that up with like, okay, is this the work that can support me to keep making it in my 30s? No one has it's probably pretty rare to have that foresight, but also to think that could undermine the whole thing. It's like this, it's this very interesting little puzzle, and I think I'm still trying to sort it out. Like, I'm not fond of giving people advice in this. Yeah. I usually just go like, don't do it. That's my advice. Don't do it. If you can choose not to, there's like some ideas in Zen that are similar to this. Like, Basically, like, just don't go down this fucking path if you cannot. Like, if you're not like hung up on this weird ruminating problem of existential crises, just like don't even bother. It's just go actually live normal life. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Because it's better. That's totally it's true. Actually better.
I think that's, well, if you're not the person for it, like, you think about this, like, imagine that there are a certain number of artist jobs in the world. Imagine that there is a job posting on LinkedIn that says artist, you know, you can click quick apply, you know, and you are one of, and it says like over 900 million applications have been submitted. And they're like, yeah, they're only hiring one person for this. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, you know what? I don't know if I need to go through the 25 rounds of interviews that will last throughout your entire 20s and 30s and maybe into your 40s and maybe beyond, you know, if you are to stick with it, you know, that's kind of what you're in for. That's
true. And I think it speaks to, but there's a reason, right? Like you can get all, well, you can be a little pussy about it and be like, well, it's because society doesn't understand art. It's like, no, it's because it doesn't need it in a certain sense. Like it needs a guy who knows how to design the most beautiful toaster imaginable. And you need to have the humility to be like, that is an awesome and worthwhile pursuit. And it's very evident in Japan that that's a mentality when you go there. Like, everything matters because everyone recognized at a certain point that magic was everywhere and could be carried everywhere. But there became this kind of branded notion of how you make art and what an artist is. And it does grab you when you're young. And it can undermine some of the mundane beauty of design, I would say.
Sure.
In that sense, I think there's millions of design jobs with a certain perspective. And I'm not trying to dilute it and make it kind of hippie-ish. It's just that I think you can do things really at an artful level, at a design level that really, really have crazy impact. And it doesn't mean they're going to know your name because you designed the toaster well. But I do find, we lack that. It's like everyone wants to be the quarterback of a team.
Yeah, for sure.
No one wants to be a lineman. And in design, what I liked is like you can kind of be different positions in different jobs, honestly, too.
I also think, you know, to stretch the metaphor a little bit, it's just kind of, well, to be like, if you're a genuinely creative person, you know, you can be creative in anything that you do. Like, I mean, this is kind of dad talk here, but it's just kind of like, whatever you do, just like do it. Whatever you do, you know, whatever you are, whatever you want to be a good one. Is that Lincoln? I don't know. And it's like, in some ways,
probably Lincoln.
Just, probably. Just being like an artist is the least creative career choice you could ever make as a creative person. It is so obvious. Like, why would that's as far as you got? You're like, I'm creative, I should be an artist. That's it? That's as far as you thought about it? Like,
fair enough. Good point.
It's interesting. Like, looking around the world these days, everything is designed. Everything has become so much more designed. You're looking at like, we
live in the most designed period of time ever.
Absolutely. And there's so much creativity and thought that goes into that. And again, it's problem solving because you're like, doesn't it suck that like, you know, like all the diaper bags are like designed for like women? Like, can we have a man's diaper bag? You know, like, wow, what a stupid thought. But they've really definitely started making like daddy diaper bags.
I gotta see that shit. Camo diapers.
Yeah. Just, you know, like waxed canvas. Like, I don't know. There's so many different things you could, but yeah, the world is very designed now. And that really is like a combination of like being outside yourself and observing, you know, problems in the world or just problems, you know, from your own perspective. And like, how can I help? I don't think that's like the first question that most people ask, you know, how can I help? It's just kind of like, you know,
not the first question an artist would ask in any context, but
probably not.
I think, for me, it was really difficult to come to terms with the culture I would be contributing to. And I think as an artist, I felt that I could almost quarter myself off in like a timeless fashion, be like, nobody understands what the hell this work is about, but they will in 100 years when the culture is. And for me, what's quite wholesome about moving towards design is like, as much as I don't like several elements of the culture I participate in, it's steps in rectifying the relationship, and it's steps in participating without whining about it. It's like,
yeah,
like
for
this,
real.
and it gives me a lot of means to do so.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. I think it's, I've at least in my own mind, I can see that as a newborn, your sphere of attention is very narrow,
Yeah.
And then if we imagine it expands, your concerns start to expand as you age. And my part of my fear as a quote unquote fine artist or comic artist was that I would be stuck at a very stunted circle, and design really helped me. And maybe it's not even design, it's just a way of thinking that then design attracted to. It really helped me to understand, oh man, we can really stretch this thing out. I went to Las Vegas once and I was like, holy shit. As much as some of the aesthetics were like horrible, it's a very manufactured world. And I started looking at like, holy shit, that sign is enormous, or that artifact is so big. I was kind of like, I got to get bigger, I got to know how to make scale wise, and just like the connections need to expand. I didn't feel comfortable at certain levels. I don't know.
That's
music
really
is so different, right? It's such a different problem. It almost seems like you might have to reverse engineer that sometimes people get so lost in the sauce, like so lost in the performativity and the crowd and the hedonism, that finally when they have time to kind of just become an individual in a room, that's what's relieving. And so I see them as inverted in some ways.
That's interesting. One of the, like, I love stand-up comedy. I've always been a fan of comedy. And one of the things that's really true about that particular art form is that you can't do it alone. There is no comedy with one person in a room. But like, one person playing cello in a room for no audience, it is the thing. You know what I mean? Pop music might be somewhere in the middle where, like, I guess it is sort of intrinsically its own expression and form of art, but it really is more about like a dialogue between the artist and the audience, more so than like, I don't know. I mean, there is something about visual art that it communicates quite obtusely. Most people don't really get it or care to get it. It's just kind of like, oh, huh, you're just at the museum, or whatever. Or even like a comic, like you were saying, you finish writing it, you've communicated to yourself. Like, it is sort of self-contained, and it is a thing, and it's done. Not everything is like that, I always think about pottery and how this, like, ceramics is like people still kind of do it, but like, like Grecian urns used to be like a main storytelling device, we think about that today. It seems really bizarre, that like your coffee cup is somehow like a storytelling vehicle. But every like diner has their own like coffee cup, collection or whatever. And it does tell something about the place, about its values. But yeah, just saying, just like kind of using that comedy as like a touch point of like, this is the most social art form that we really have today. And that everything else is kind of like on a gradient, I think, in between that. And like in terms of how it talks to its audience versus just being like in a dark room, kind of shining its light, which a lot, like the stuff that sounds like you're interested in is much more in that world, less performative, more, introspective and sort of like self-validating than something like a joke or a song, even a song or a film or something.
Well, I've always been interested in world building, and I think by definition, you kind of assume it's someone building their own world, which means they're kind of not in this one when they're doing it. I still love artists that do that. But I just found that, as I got older, it seemed like that wasn't necessarily for me. I still value the uniformity of like the efforts on a church or something where you have all these amazing craftsmen working to make one super focused, beautiful thing. So I definitely struggle with the fragmentation of, or everyone's artistic efforts in some sense.
Sure.
But I do my best to rectify it, and that's part of why I run an art center, and that is close. That gets me close, honestly. It's pretty much the closest I'm ever going to get, I think. And yeah, it's just like I'm trying to always expand out, but it's kind of curious. For me, I see a very clear narrative thread, but that's just my personality. I see patterns pretty much whether they're there or not. And
yeah.
For you, what can you imagine where you're headed? Do you know how these things stack? Do they stack? Is it more of a horizontal plane? And do you get concerned about the kind of, is it concerning that there's the bouncing, or do you like the bouncing around?
Man, you really caught me at like the perfect time, because I really am. Well, I think about it, like I made some pretty short-term, choices, especially, being a musician, and like not going to school, like dropping out of college, like twice in my 20s to join touring bands. Both times it was just like, well, I got a gig, bye, and I'm like, I don't regret it. That was super useful. And I love the idea of having a life that has many chapters, not just one long, unfuckable Madonna, epilogue. It's just, I don't,
no, she's fuckable. That's her problem.
No, she is fuckable. Exactly. Exactly. Well, and she is, that's just the thing. It's just a whole different, standard. She's just, trying to be young. That's different, than being fuckable, I think. But,
we don't need to debate the fuckability of Madonna. But
no, we don't. We'll let the comments do that. But I am definitely questioning now, sort of some of my motivations and like how I'm getting where I'm going. Like I said, my fiance is a pastry chef, and it's something that we talked about on our first date, that we both wanted to, own our own businesses. I talked about the time I wanted to kind of run a design shop, or just like a freelance outfit. Like I had a bunch of friends who were kind of interested in the same thing, and we were trying to figure out how to put our different, skill sets together. And she was working at a bakery, and she's like, I really love making these specialty cakes, and, I like classic French pastry and stuff. I'd love to open my own thing. We kind of talked about it like, maybe that's a thing, maybe like all of our experience, kind of comes together in this thing. And so we did have a chance to work together for a little while. It's really interesting because like we are good partners, and, you were saying you cringe when a couple becomes each other. And funnily, and we always just joked like we're sisters because we have like the same hair, and we both like wear like the same like bun, but we're really very different people, like in almost every sense. And there's something like about kind of like, I feel like we kind of clicked together in a way that I hadn't with anything else in my life. And I'm like, oh, it is real. Okay. That's a real feeling. Okay. Interesting. Like I said, before I met her, I'd never missed anyone in my life. And I'm like, I know it sounds like I'm a sociopath, but I just like,
it's okay.
But maybe it was just like that, like solipsistic, 20s artist mindset that was, I mean, if I had been like in investment banking, in my 20s, and I just like didn't miss anyone and didn't have a successful, long term, I would have crushed it, first of all, but no one would have like even questioned it. Just like, yeah, he's career focused. Like that's acceptable, And now I'm just kind of like, I think I wouldn't say I'm having a crisis, but I mean, every day is a crisis in its own way. And I feel like I've come back to just the things I was saying earlier. I mean, they're really broad, but I find that I really get a lot out of working with other people and collaborating and bouncing things off of each other. And I feel like I'm a good listener, and I can be critical of other people without, while still, trying to, like, I understand people's goals, and I'm like, how can we help you get that? But also like, here's what I'm seeing that you probably don't see being outside of you. Like I loved working with the owners at my design agency because they were so often like out of the creative process, and they were just kind of like, man, I got into this because I like drawing, but now I just like go golfing and like, sell our product to like presidents of universities. It's just fucking boring. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, I hear ya. Like, let's sit down and like work on something together. And there's something, there's a cautionary tale, but there's also, it's like, that's the aspiration kind of, is we all want to become that unfuckable Madonna, at the end of the day, or that's like what we're supposedly reaching for, is like that security and, success of like, I did it. But, yeah, I don't know. When I think back to my whole life, design is the thing that I've been doing since I was, a child, and it's the thing I have the most experience in, and it kind of brings a lot of my things together. Like you said, it keeps you connected to the world. I sort of framed it as like, when I was an artist, I was interested in myself, and as a designer, I'm interested in the rest of the world. And that is a much deeper and like longer pursuit. So, for me at least. So I think that's kind of where my interest and my head is headed. But I'm on a new journey right now for sure. And being in a new place too is always like, we've been here for like almost 2 years now, but LA is still a new city to me. And, still exploring and finding the things that interest me.
And so did I understand correctly that you would try to create something of like a design firm? Something a little bigger?
Right now, I don't think that's my interest. It was, and especially when I was closer to like a smaller design community in Madison. It's kind of like what I was saying about Fox, where, in a small town, you can become a part of the culture and a part of the community in a much bigger way, than I'm currently seeing in LA. But I also, I'm kind of curious, like, where are you at? So you said that I know that you did comics and stuff, and now you are primarily in design. Is that right?
I use design as like a nice, vague but clear answer. And to kind of distance myself from my earlier phase, but I don't know if it really describes what I do that well. So, I mean, I do my best. I'm behind on a book I should have done like a couple months back, but that's definitely personal work. For a period there, I was carving out an hour a day to be frivolous, to draw,
Sure.
And that was for the past 3 years. I try to keep that. I want that shame to remain, in a sense. I want to feel that I was given some kind of idiosyncratic expression that I have to tend to. It's just that
sure,
the garden's getting bigger, and the time is getting less. So I have to be wiser about how I use all these things. And, my day consists of, unfortunately, increasingly managerial tasks, a lot of meetings. I like dealing with people, but I don't in the same token.
Yeah.
But it's the price one pays, you got to teach people, you got to create systems that people can plug into. But yeah, I mean, I have a fabrication company with my partner, Matthew, and then cool. The art center is a gargantuan undertaking, and in that world, there's everything. There's art direction, there's promo strategy, there's design every day. For me, the mission has to feel, heroic and mythological still. When I made art, it felt like that was happening in a different dimension, but now I want it to be here and visible, and I want there to be skin in the game and risk and danger. What I don't like about a lot of design is it feels very neutered and corporate. So I think I try to look at it from the most stupid perspective as possible, and by that I mean like what is it at the fundamental levels, and what can you do with it? Not what does it look like when you go to school? What does it look like when you want to work from it? So, again, I don't think I answered your question fantastically, but I think I would just have to show you some things I made, because I feel that it's all downstream from just who I am, and I'm very fortunate in that sense to have been given the opportunities and to have built my career in that sense, because it's an unheard of position to be in the past. I mean, your career or your job had nothing to do with you. It had to do with what the society needed. And so I try to never complain about my work because it's obscene. I don't know how long it will remain as such, but to even express oneself within one's work or to look for maturation within work is a very new concept. So yeah, it's better seen than discussed, but that's the best I can do. And there's like every day is different, and I like that about it. And I like the physicality of objects and designing things that get built and having control over that. And
totally,
one of my main frustrations was shipping it out to someone who cared less about me, and then they either fuck up the page order in a publication, wrong colors. But I contracted in that moment, right? I reverted to the control freak, and I said, we need to seize all the means of production, not in the Marxist sense, in the sense of just like, we need control over everything we're making. And then I, over time, had to realize, like, no, if I don't trust people, if I don't instruct at the highest level within an email and cover every potential error, then I'm just going to diminish my ability. If I don't trust the guy who is a great publisher and find him, and it's just, I can't DIY my every fucking thing, There's a paranoia in that way of thinking.
Well, but yeah, that does also explain like how, as you progress in a career of, creation, that you do inevitably need to trust other people to execute on some of the things, some of the ideas you have. And so you have to move somewhat away from, the creation of something and more towards management and things you're talking about. Just kind of bringing to light, like, it is like a very holistic pursuit, and you can't just be good at, one thing and, try to make that your life's work. I mean, some people can, but again, just what you're talking about is like really interesting to me, and kind of finding like that space. We had this coworker who's older and, was just very problematic, and we just be like, now this is a person who's in power, who's older, who's kind of just like, you can't really change my mind. You can't change who I am. And I'm like, how do we prevent ourselves from becoming that exact thing when we, progress and succeed at something in the world? When we get to the point where no one can tell us anything because we are so saddled with, our own ideas or responsibilities or things that we feel like we have to hold on to so tight that, we don't have room to argue about our values or about our, whatever preconceived notions we have about each other or whatever it is. Like, or is it even worth resisting? Are we just like does everyone kind of hardening, into whatever they are over time? I mean, like, is everyone listening to the same music they were listening to when they were in college? And, still
they might, and I don't know if it's worth resisting. I'm conflicted, ambivalent about that, because just in the sense that there are chapters, like perhaps from a collective perspective, you do become calcified and old, and you present a kind of frustration or a break or even a catalyst to the youngins beneath you who are fed up with your shit. Right. And then to be too, I don't believe in parents being cool or friends with their kids. It seemed like a kind of flattening of what should be occurring. And like, children need the what would you say? The strength of attention that allows them to rebel properly. And when you pull that chair out from under them and you're like, oh yeah, that's cool if you want to, whatever, go do heroin and have a threesome in the backyard. Like, you kind of rob them of the, what would you say, of the subversive quality of it. That's why I don't talk about it a lot. Like, I don't want my museums to be cool. Be lame. Show lame shit. Always be 50 years behind, and let actual scenes make art and hate you. Like, I don't need
Totally
25-year-olds showing paintings next to Picasso. I don't need that.
yeah.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
I think you're right. That's funny.
I'm very categorical. I get very. I'm just like, you should be what that's the funny thing is, like, I feel that way, and yet I can't even define what a designer is or what I do. But I just feel that when I'm doing it, I try to be categorically that thing. So, if I'm in illustration mode, I try to think about what that means. And then my favorite things, ironically, are the things that defy or fall right in the middle of two categories, and they start to push out. So I think that makes sense for me. Is like, I have that concern, and then, like I said, probably my favorite artists are artists who are designers as well. Like in the 70s, I feel like there was a lot of that going on, and in school, that's what I valued.
Oh, interesting. I was going to say Chris Ware comes to mind.
Chris Ware, man, it's funny. I remember, he's obviously ridiculously good and deserving of respect, but I'll jokingly, who am I to talk shit about him? But it's just funny. I just think, like, shit is so dry. It's just the driest, most depressing. I don't know. I just have no. I don't want anything to do with it. I read it when I was younger. Yeah, I'm just like. Actually, I kind of feel the same about Yorgos. Yorgos, right? Whatever his name is. No, he's the guy who directs. He's like, everyone loves him right now. Yeah, I'm just like, I like Dogtooth, and then I was just like, I kept watching his movies, and I just realized, like, man, this shit is like so just dead to me in a weird way. And
where are you from? Are you from Chicago?
No, I'm from good old New Jersey, and that's where I'm sitting right now.
Oh my God. How did you end up a Bears fan? What went wrong?
Oh, a lot of things went wrong. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just rambling. No, Ware's, obviously they both deserve great respect, great artists. I just, again, as I became more of a human, I'm just like, what am I doing here when I enter certain artistic spaces?
I hear that. The thing I was going to say about Chris Ware is, I mean, he's from Chicago, right? And like, so much of his art has this Midwestern repression to it.
Oh, that makes sense.
Like,
yeah,
I really do think that's like one of the big themes of his work, and that it is resonant to people who had that upbringing or have that like gene or have that example in their family or whatever. And like, reading between the lines is kind of your bread and butter, and like, that's what that style is about to me.
No, I mean, he's a great example, because he's designed book covers for like other, like Crazy Cat, and they're great.
Right.
But they're so fucking clean. It almost pisses me off. But I know that he also does, like, I've seen his stuff in person, and it's beautiful because it's not clean. You see like all the revisions. But yeah, there's just like this fucking, it's just so, it's funny. If it was made now, you'd be like, this is just like a digital, like, did this guy make this in Illustrator?
Right. But no,
so it's not his fault. It's not his fault. It's just that I feel like the way things progressed makes me kind of like more of this like dry kind of clean line.
Sure.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm just absolutely rambling.
No, not at all. I liked it. It also reminded me of one more. My favorite comic is called Alec by what's his name? Campbell. He illustrated From Hell with
Alan Moore.
Yeah, with Alan Moore and anyway, Campbell. I feel so bad. I really love this book. In any case, he basically started out as just like a zine maker, and then ended up like after From Hell, created his own publishing company working with Alan Moore, and kind of became a completely different kind of artist. And his stuff is all Campbell. Like. Yeah, that's right. Eddie Campbell. Thanks. I love this guy. Those illustrations are super alive and very, very fast and expressive. And he was using those old, I forget what they're called, zipatones. They're like halftone patterns he like cut out. And there's like a real physical nature to that. And like the early stuff is just him being like a fuckboy, like drunk, working like a like in a factory. And then like he slowly becomes like a successful artist and kind of tries to figure out what that means. And he actually has a story in there called how to be a successful artist or how to be a successful artist, how to successfully be an artist. He's like, don't conflate these things. These aren't being successful and being an artist aren't the same thing. But the subtitle of that book is My Journey from Beer to Wine. And it's such a funny, like, and kind of obvious thing, but it's like, there is just a evolving complexity, and something that seems distasteful to you when you're younger can become, you know, the thing that you actually desire. I'm like not a big wine fan. I'm still maybe in my beer phase. Maybe I'm still like more of an adolescent, but Jesse was trying to, our friend Jesse Ballmer was trying to get me to appreciate some wine. And I was like, I don't know, man, it's just like so astringent. It dries your mouth out. He's like, that's the best part. And I'm like, I literally never thought of trying to appreciate that as like a sensation or an aspect of, you know, it's like spicy food. It's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Yeah. Until you like desire that and see something valuable in that. And, you know, it's just, I feel like that's kind of the theme of our conversation is like finding that as we age and as we go through different stages in our career and our lives, that certain things that seem undesirable actually become the thing that you're looking for, which seem anathema to the whole process, you know, to your inner child and your younger self. But like you were saying too, just like you need to set up something to rebel against, and like you become the thing that your inner child is rebelling against. And, you know, there's something kind of cool about that. And
that's true. Yeah.
It makes room. It just makes room. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think of it as like your 20-year-old self should never agree with your 30-year-old self should never agree with your, like you should be embarrassed by each succession. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
for sure. Yeah.
That shows a certain growth actually. And to fear that shame or that embarrassment is to stunt yourself.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's like not progressing then. Is that what you want? Some people say, yeah, sure. Because if you're successful, if you're massively successful at something, how can you justify changing it?
Right.
It's just tough. I mean, you think about people like successful artists that have like a team working for them who like pay their mortgages with, you know, this art or this music or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's maybe not as important for you to be as expressive as it is for you to be supportive and to be a part of a team and, you know, to put food on the table for people's kids. You know, it's like, that is just kind of part of the process of leveling up and accepting more responsibility.
Yeah. I think he's just got the balls to do it. You just got to go.
Or you got to be forced to do it.
It's tricky. You know? I definitely, it's definitely an uncomfortable thing, but yeah, you gotta, it's not an easy thing to figure out. When you start having people who rely on you or who you employ, it really does change one's relationship to the whole process. But I think there's a graceful and elegant way to meet every specific challenge, and to think otherwise is just cowardice. It's just a lack of belief in your own ability to really come up with new ways to address the very singular problem that's going to hit you every day.
Right. You think you're creative? Okay, well, Guess what? It's a lifelong fight, so get at it.
All right, so what should people, how can they get to know you?
How can they get to know me personally? I can, I'll put my email in the link, and they can email me if they want. I mean, I have a portfolio site, and I started making a hot sauce that I'm going to start marketing. It's named after my cat, Hottie Sauce. It's a fresh green chili de arbol hot sauce. Wow. That I'm pretty stoked about. You don't see that particular. I don't know why exactly. They're usually dried when you see arbols. They're more cayenne like, but there's something unique about it, and I'll start shipping that out pretty soon. So, I don't know. I guess.
So we got to keep an eye out for some hot sauce, huh?
Plenty of stuff. Come play some Magic, with me. Join, hit me up. Join our Discord. We've got a big, lively Discord of wizards around LA. If people want to play Magic, I think we're going to be releasing a Fox 10-year Shameless Cash Grab re-release
Sick.
next year. So I'll get a chance to do a little bit more of that, my 20s design type of stuff, making some merch or something like that.
Is there a Fox song that really embodies you? You're like, that's me right there.
Well, like probably like our most successful song, it's called Slow Motion. And it was just the process of, I was looking through our singer Monica's like voice notes one day when she was at work. And I just found these two that I liked. And I was like, these are close to being in the same key. I'm like, let's just put like, this is a song now. And she was like, it doesn't really make sense. I'm like, I know, but it's like, it sounds good, you know? And, it created a certain tension in the band because it did end up becoming like kind of earwormy, but didn't necessarily represent like what she wanted to do with songwriting. And maybe is like part of the catalyst for why we like broke up and moved on, you know, each individually from that band. Not exactly,
so
not like directly. I mean, yeah, I'll take all the credit. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. As a leader, you take the credit and you take the blame. You know what I mean? You get it all.
That's true. It's true. So
I'm cool with it. I think that, you know, everyone kind of gets what they want when you break up. Like it's usually for the best when a band or a relationship or a family breaks up, you know, it's just, hey, like you have a chance to be better off all individually. Hopefully. So yeah, I'm not going to say I instigated it, just that, you know, it's like you kind of learn what you want by not getting what you want to some degree. It's a process of elimination and like, I actually want my songs to be more narrative and more personal and blah, blah, blah. Great. Like, you know, then that's something that you should go get. And I think that's fine. You know, I think that's cool.
So Slow Motion.
Yeah, that'd be the song.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah. I think that's where I'll leave it. I'll leave the rest a little, you know, there's still a little mystery in me yet.
Yeah, we didn't cover everything in 1 hour.
Almost. That was almost my entire personality. We got really, really close.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
You heard my cat. I mean, one of my cats. What else is there? That's it. We got it all.
That's all there is.
I'm stoked. It was good talking to you, Michael. I enjoyed this.
Same. Thanks for your time.
All right, man. Have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace.
Later.
Music by Dory Bavarsky and Mingja Chen. Next up, we'll see what happens. We'll see where it goes. We never know. We shall see.